What initially seemed like a standard precision attack quickly turned into something far stranger. When the satellite feed updated only a few minutes later, Ukrainian commanders were stunned. The dam was still standing, but Russia's entire defensive strategy had collapsed. Whatever had gone wrong inside that structure defied both armies' expectations. Normally, explosions don't roll across the quiet river valleys of eastern Ukraine, but on this night, the stillness broke. A region usually wrapped in fog and early morning quiet suddenly felt charged alive, almost as if the air itself sensed what was approaching. It began as a soft vibration, a distant murmur so faint it could have been dismissed as nothing more than the wind brushing across tree branches. Even the Russian sentries hardly reacted, but moments later, that gentle hum sharpened into a high, slicing whistle that cut through the icy darkness. Just before sunrise, radar stations flickered to life. A single streak raced across their screens with impossible speed. Operators stared, unsure if what they were seeing was real or a sensor error. The signal skimmed so close to the Earth, so quickly, that several crews assumed the equipment had glitched. But it was no malfunction. A Ukrainian aircraft was racing forward at a dangerously low altitude, riding just above the treetops, so low it practically grazed the morning fog drifting over the fields. Ukrainian aviators call this technique nap of the earth flying, dropping beneath the radar line, weaving between hills and folds in the terrain to remain invisible. Within seconds, Russian air defense units lurched into motion. Chairs were knocked over, half-finished mugs of tea spilled, and alarms shrieked through every bunker. Crimson warning lights splashed across thick concrete walls. Officers shouted commands. Soldiers scrambled for their stations. But they were already too late. This wasn't an ordinary plane. It was one of Ukraine's most carefully protected fighter jets, a rare aircraft reserved only for missions so dangerous that only the most elite pilots were entrusted with them. Ukraine had guarded this jet like a hidden ace, waiting for a moment when the stakes were high enough to justify risking it. That moment had arrived. Its target was not a command hub or a supply column. It was far more unusual and far more strategically important. A Russian-controlled dam deep inside the occupied zone. Most people would see nothing but a piece of infrastructure. But in this war, it had evolved into something far more dangerous, a strategic choke point. For months, Russian forces had manipulated the dam's water levels to flood vast stretches of land, blocking Ukrainian troop movements. Every attempt to advance ended the same way, soaked fields turning to mud, armored vehicles sinking, infantry forced to reroute. The dam wasn't just a structure, it was a weapon, silent but immensely effective. And tonight, Ukraine intended to neutralize it. The jet thundered forward, engines wailing as the pilot locked onto the target. With steady, deliberate calm, he released a precision-guided bomb designed to pierce reinforced concrete. On the ground, Russian troops glanced upward, confused by a dark speck falling from the early dawn sky. They had only a few seconds to understand what they were seeing. A blinding flash erupted, a thunderous boom rolled across the valley. The earth trembled beneath their feet. Then silence, a still, eerie silence. But inside that silence, something unusual began to unfold. Something neither army had foreseen, something that would reshape the battlefield. The explosion was only the beginning. To understand why Ukraine risked one of its rarest jets, you have to understand the dam's hidden importance. It wasn't just holding back water, it had become one of Russia's most effective and underestimated tools of control. By manipulating the dam's output, Russian commanders reshaped the terrain without firing a shot. Before every Ukrainian counterattack, they cracked open the floodgates. Water poured into low-lying farmland, turning open fields into sticky marshes. Tanks bogged down, soldiers slowed to a crawl. Supply routes vanished under waist-high mud. Every hour Ukraine lost allowed Russia to reinforce, reposition artillery, or dig in deeper. The dam functioned like an invisible shield, untouchable, unshootable, but devastatingly effective. Russia believed it was completely protected. Air defense systems formed overlapping rings around its short range, medium range, and long-range missiles creating layers of impenetrable coverage, trenches carved into river banks, snipers assigned to elevated perches, constant patrols, drones circling overhead day and night. To Moscow, this was more than infrastructure, it was a pillar of their military strategy. And they were certain Ukraine would never attempt a strike not with those defenses and not with the risk of causing a catastrophic flood. But Ukrainian intelligence uncovered something shocking. Intercepted communications, drone footage, and satellite data revealed a pattern. Russian engineers had been lowering the reservoir significantly over several weeks. At first, analysts thought it was routine, but then the truth became clear. Russia was preparing for a massive, deliberate release of water timed to coincide with Ukraine's next offensive. A torrent that could wipe out fields, roads, and entire communities. A flood that would displace thousands, turning their homes into lakes. This wasn't just military strategy, it was environmental warfare. And so, faced with a terrible choice, allow Russia to unleash disaster, or take action, Ukraine chose the latter. The mission sounded simple on paper: disable the dam's operational controls without destroying the structure. A surgical strike strong enough to stop the floodgates, but not strong enough to cause a humanitarian catastrophe. Precise, controlled, exact, but even with all their planning, no one predicted the chain reaction that followed. When the bomb hit, Ukrainian staff huddled around monitors, waiting for fresh satellite images. They expected damage only to the control center, nothing more. But what they saw shocked them. The bomb had struck perfectly, but internal parts of the dam were fracturing. Water pushed through new cracks with far more force than expected. Within minutes, analysts understood what had happened. The strike wasn't the cause of the breakdown, it was merely the spark. Russian engineers had overloaded the internal valves in preparation for their planned flood, pushing water pressure far beyond safe limits. The entire system had been primed like a spring on the verge of snapping. The bomb simply released it. Valves ruptured. Gates twisted out of place. Chambers buckled. Floodwaters poured through at chaotic, uncontrollable levels, not enough to destroy the dam, but more than enough to wreak havoc across Russian positions. Trenches filled rapidly. Soldiers scrambled through freezing currents. Weapons floated away. Mortar toppled. Defensive positions built over weeks disappeared within an hour. Radio channels filled with panic. Water rising to meters. We've lost the outpost. Equipment gone. Request evacuation. Russian units were stranded. Vehicles sank. Artillery became isolated on shrinking islands of dry ground. The dam Russia's silent weapon had turned against them, and the bitter irony. The flood Russia intended to unleash on Ukraine was now devastating their own troops. As drone feeds captured the collapse of their defenses, Ukrainian units prepared to strike. This was the opportunity they had been waiting for. Infantry pushed forward across ground that had been impassable. Artillery rained down on trapped Russian units. Drones targeted immobilized vehicles. Chaos spread through Russian ranks as soldiers tried to climb out of waist-deep water, abandoning rifles and equipment in desperation. For the first time in weeks, Ukraine broke through Russia's water-protected defense belt. The unexpected surge created cracks, gaps, and forced retreats, openings Ukraine immediately exploited. Armor advanced through the new breach. Positions Russia believed untouchable fell within hours. A strike intended only to disable a control room had ignited one of the most consequential turns of the conflict. And this was only the beginning. Russian state media scrambled to blame Ukraine, claiming reckless destruction. But videos circulating online proved otherwise. The dam stood. No villages were washed away. The humanitarian disaster Russia described did not exist. What collapsed was Russia's plan. Soldiers posted furious videos from flooded trenches. Bloggers demanded answers. Analysts openly questioned why the dam had been overloaded. Even officials inside the Kremlin admitted the scale of the miscalculation. Meanwhile, Ukraine celebrated a rare, crucial victory. Russia's water-based defensive line was broken. Ukrainian forces pushed into newly accessible territory. The massive flood Russia intended never came. villages were saved, positions captured. And most importantly, Ukraine had outsmarted Russia, not with overwhelming force, but with planning, with timing, with precision. As one analyst put it, this was the strike that turned Russia's own weapon against them. One aircraft, one pilot, one bomb, one dam, and a chain reaction that reshaped the battlefield. Sometimes, in war, it's the smallest cracks that cause the largest collapse. Don't forget to like, subscribe to History of Wars, and turn on notifications. More powerful stories are on the way.